Good evening and welcome to Council Chambers. It is Monday, January 29th, just after 7 p.m. And if you could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All set? Roll call, please.
Councillor Auclair.
Excused.
Councillor Carrasco.
Present.
Councillor Clements.
Present.
Councillor DePietro.
Present.
Councillor Manna.
Present.
Councillor Morales.
Present.
Councillor Nash.
Present.
Councillor Steves.
Present.
Okay, we have our quorum. Moving on to agenda item number 4, subcommittee summaries. Relevant minutes to be read at each agenda item. The first one up is Councillor Steves, General Government.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a very long meeting on Wednesday, the 24th.
We missed our own minutes, if you don't mind the interruption.
Oh, sorry. I apologize.
Thank you.
for
You're
that.
right. Thank you.
We both missed it.
Very good point, yeah.
All righty, let's go back here. Agenda item number 3, consider and accept the Town Council meeting minutes of January 8th, 2018. There was a typo, it said 17, but we've corrected that. It is 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Oops.
Madam Chair.
Councilor Manna.
On page 2, in the third paragraph,
Please speak up into the mic.
page 2, third paragraph, it says, when Vice Chairman Steves was talking about the nomination papers, it's typed in here February 16th that they'll be available. I think that should be January
I
16th.
think you're right, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. It's January.
They're already available, so.
Okay.
And also, one more thing, on page 3, in the first paragraph, where it's talking about the billing services for the ambulance, I believe that should be Chief DeFranzo and not Chief Woodson.
Yeah, you're
This
right.
is for the fire department.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. Good catch. Okay. Did we get a second on that? Because I only heard the first. We did. Okay, sorry, I didn't hear that, so I was surprised. All right. There is a correction on reading the minutes. I was not here, but in reading the minutes, and another councilor mentioned it too, I questioned DPW Director Wakely, excuse me. I'll get it together here in a second. On page 4, second paragraph down, well, actually, first paragraph. It says, Mrs. Blakely described how work was done on the boilers downstairs instead, and the ramp project was put on hold to do one big upgrade of the ramp. That was not a correct statement, according to her. She commented she wanted it to be very clear we did not use the money instead. So she would like it to be the ramp project was delayed because it was more than anticipated, and in reviewing the boiler project, there was a need to relocate the vents, which complicated the ramp project, and therefore, again, the ramp project was put on hold until the funds and such could be located. So we just wanted to be clear that it wasn't done instead, because that would be, without coming to council to reappropriate those funds, that could be a problem.
Right.
So if I was not here, if everyone's okay with that accuracy in terms of the intent.
As I recall, there was also some discussion of having to remove an oil tank under there?
Correct. The oil
Yes.
tank has to be removed, the vents have to be relocated, and therefore that ramp project, again, which we had discussed at one time, is definitely a larger project than what we originally put money aside for, which we did, and now there's more money, another $20,000 it looks like, no, $35,000. So eventually we'll get that ramp project done. In the meantime, what they did to fix that last year seems to be holding up well. The floating of the cement eliminated all that plywood mess. So right now it's being maintained, and it is safe for everyone to get access to the town hall. Okay. Are there any other corrections or deletions or? Okay. All right. Seeing none, I will abstain from this. All those in favor? It's 7. Thank you. Now we will move on. I do apologize again. Subcommittee summaries, and we were at general government.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. As I said, we had a lengthy meeting on Gen Gov on Wednesday, the 24th. There were a couple of key items. We discussed the proposed lawsuit issue regarding Sweeney American law, and I just want to we're not getting sued. And it's not going to cost us anything to sue anybody. This is to encourage the town to join an opioid lawsuit that's a nationwide lawsuit in which what they're trying to do, it's kind of like the old tobacco lawsuits from years ago. However, they're doing it a little bit differently. Instead of just doing it at the state level, they're trying to do it at the municipal level because each town has a little bit of different issues with the opioid crisis and how it's impacted them. So the idea is that they're going to take it and basically join all of these this large sum of municipal cases at a national level, and then kind of join all these cases in a case that's going on in Ohio right now. And then if we decide at some point that we kind of don't like where things are going, we can always withdraw from the bigger case and pursue a case on the federal court level here in Massachusetts if we so decide. And the idea is to break down the cost of the opioid crisis by going after the biggest distributors and to basically help them responsible for a lot of the issues that we're seeing and try to get back some of the costs that have hit us over the years and to give us some funds to help address the crisis going forward. I have not actually written up the minutes yet, so that's kind of the summary. It is on the agenda later today. Let's see. Also, the second issue is to review the Castle Booze contract for the fire station facility study. That's on the agenda later tonight, so I'll get to that later. To review the park grant requirements, and we ended up deciding to postpone that to the next Gen Gov because we needed some more information. We briefly discussed supporting changes to Chapter 61, which in Massachusetts, it's the law that covers conservation land, forestry land, agricultural land that's under protection, and if it's a first refusal rights, if the owner wants to sell or change the uses, the town has first refusal rights to buy the property. And what's going on is that there's a bill in front of the legislature at the moment to take a look at extending the process so that towns have more time to play with it, to get funding, to get a nonprofit environmental group to work with them and get grants, whatever it is that's necessary. So we talked a little bit about that. We didn't get too far with that because basically everybody was brain fried at that point. So we'll probably bring that up again at some point. And we also have our next meeting is 7 o'clock on Monday the 5th or immediately after P&D, which is right before it. So that's it.
Thank you. Department of Public Works, Councilor DePietro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The minutes will be forthcoming from the last meeting we've had done since. Although I would like to mention that Heather from the Department of Public Works was kind enough to escort a tour, Councilor Nash, Councilor Clemens, myself, and I wish some other folks would have showed up. But I think it's something we should do at least annually. And it was quite educational, and a lot of procurements that go before the council would be a lot better understood if you walked around and actually looked at what Heather had to show us that day. I learned quite a bit, and I've been in DPW facilities many times, but having to walk through with her was it was enlightening. It really was, and I think it should be an annual event. I really do for any future subcommittee chairs, and certainly for the council. And I'd like to thank Heather. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you for arranging that. Item number 4C, Education and Human Services, that'd be Councilor Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. Joint EHS Town Council meeting was held last Wednesday, January 24th. We had a short agenda. One item tonight on the Town Council agenda, number 12, was discussed, so I'll share a few notes at that time, perhaps. We do have a couple of upcoming meetings planned, including Wednesday, February 7th, and another date that I'll hold with Yvonne probably tomorrow for Thursday, February 22nd. Also, for the council's clarification, there are 2 sets of minutes in your vision now, I guess. They weren't both in the packet. The one that we approved at our last meeting was from November 20th, was in your envelope, and the one that I handed out, I think it was awaiting you, was from this past Wednesday. And my thanks go to Citizen Member John Daniel for taking those minutes for us and getting them done so I could pass out. That's all for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. 4D is Planning and Development, and we did have a meeting, and that was on January 22nd, and I filled in for Councilor Clare at that meeting as the chair, and Councilor Steves was kind enough to take the meeting minutes, so I'm going to let him work.
Okay. That was, as she just said, it was January 22nd. A couple of the items are on our current agenda. The ones that aren't on the agenda were to review the contract with Maurice Reedy and Company for commercial drive lot approval, lot appraisal, sorry. And that situation was where Rosemary Scrivens had been a long haul to get to that point with recent work from Will Knoyer and the DPW to lay it out in parcels that make sense. And now she wants to appraise them, claiming that she has several people interested in them. The town manager noted the contract needs to be changed so that he signs it, not her. There were a couple of other questions about where money was coming from and other issues with the way things were phrased on it. So we voted unanimously to postpone action to the next P&D meeting so the issues can be corrected. The existing appraisal is 5 years old, at least. Mr. McKinney recalled it being done in 2012. And the lot layouts and other changes have invalidated it. There was some question about whether or not the back road was ever going to be built, and Rosemary said that it wasn't, as far as anybody knows, and that there were various other concerns about the contract's phrasing. So we'll bring it back, or P&D will bring it back up again when it's ready. Also, we also did a little bit of new business discussion on concerns about the landfill bylaw not being yet published and not being yet online. There was a little bit of concern about loud screaming coming from the cable studio. And I had raised the issue about asking for quotes for electrical upgrades at the common bandstand, and the town manager had emailed me about that after the fact. It was stated in his most recent weekly report, and then the response was that it's something that's being proposed for next year's capital budget, essentially. So we will see more about that when it comes down the pike. And the other issues that are specifically on the agenda, I'll get to them when they get there.
And there is a P&D meeting?
At 6:30 on Monday, right before general government.
Okay, great. Just elaborate slightly. The screaming, you didn't elaborate, so
No.
that had to do with some program that was going on,
Yes.
some religious program or something, and so there was some concern. Mr. Marchetti brought that up, and we were talking about the inability to really control much of what goes on in the cable programming because of state, federal laws and such. So it wasn't just screaming. Okay, protections of persons and property, Councilor Manna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I did have a meeting last week. I don't remember the exact date. I apologize. I do not have the meeting minutes ready. However, the 2 agenda items that were on the agenda for the meeting are on tonight for appointments for 2 officers to fill the vacancies due to retirement in our police department that are upcoming this year. And I believe Deputy Chief Dinghy is here to elaborate on those 2 agenda items if anyone has any questions. Thank you. Oh, I don't have any meetings planned at this time. Thank you.
All set?
Yep.
Great. And we move on. Agenda item 5 are chairman's announcements. And I want to point out one thing, particularly the schedule is a little bit changed here on the agenda. You'll see that we have a presentation, but we've added it as an agenda item down at agenda item number 10. That's the zoning review presentation. And I did that specifically because we have citizens forum and then we have 2 police appointments. And we thought that would just be more mindful, respectful of those in attendance, that we could do those things and then allow them to enjoy. The families are here for some of those appointments, and certainly the citizens, we don't want to postpone citizens forum any longer than necessary. So you'll notice that our presentation is a little further down, and we appreciate the planning and development and the zoning people for being understanding of that. So MMA happened a couple weeks ago on the 19th and 20th in Boston. It's always an opportunity. It was my 9th year going, and I guess my last. It's always an opportunity to improve ourselves for the community, to learn more of what's going on state and federally and all other ways. I was joined by Councilor Morales, Councilor Nash, and Councilor Manna, and Councilor DePietro, all attended, and we, a lot of great seminars, OPEB concerns, all kinds of really great seminars that we attended for those 2 days. The town manager was also in attendance, and I bumped into him a number of times, again, perusing the various booths and listening to the speakers. So a great opportunity. Hopefully more counselors, all counselors can attend in the future. Let's see, on Monday the 22nd, I was able to get out to West Street School to see a presentation for the students, the after-school program by Tom Satch Sanders, a longtime Celtics player, basketball player. I wish I could say that I knew him personally, but basketball, besides my kids playing, was not my passion. But I was joined by Councilor Nash and Councilor Carrasco to watch the kids interact with Mr. Sanders and his demeanor for the children and his support of them and what they're going through and all. It was really wonderful. I'm not exactly sure who arranged it, but it certainly was a wonderful thing for the students to be able to participate in and get some support from this legend in the basketball industry, I'm told. So thank you for attending that. Let's see, trying to think what else I had here. Zoning, there is an all-board zoning meeting. I'm not sure if everybody is aware of that. That is happening, all boards, so council's invited at 6:30 on Thursday, February 8th. If you are interested in going, that will be happening here at the Town Hall. It is a Thursday evening. And I'm trying to think, what else? Councilor Nash. We, you know, the goals and objectives meeting that you were trying to put together for council itself. So we talked about it in November, and, well, it was on the agenda in November at a meeting, and you were unable to be there, and it was postponed. And then, of course, we tried again for January 17th, and we didn't have a quorum, and I want to thank those who were able to attend that meeting. You were sick, and so we didn't have you, but there was no quorum, and so the meeting didn't happen, and I have all intents and purposes, we will work on another date and try to move this forward and see what we're doing. Obviously, we want to know if council wants to pursue that and what that will be. But I want you to know that we are still working on it, so moving forward with that. My only other question is to the town manager, and that is in regard to Foster Street and the RFP. I'm reading through. I know you sent us an email on January 18th. We had discussed this in subcommittee in November. Going back through my minutes, there is general government coming up, planning and development's coming up. Do you have the RFP together, and can we move forward with that? Because the sooner we get on the books, the sooner we can sell property maybe and get tax paying and get some money in for other endeavors. So that was my only question.
Sure.
You got laryngitis?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I apologize if I squeak a little bit tonight, but it turns out that I got laryngitis, so I'm struggling a little bit. With regard to Foster Street, the invitation to bid is almost ready. I think probably another half an hour's worth of work. We are waiting on what we thought was going to be the need to do an appraisal on the property. And what I set out to town councilors was a letter from the appraiser who originally appraised the property some years ago, saying that given the report that we received from an engineering company, that it didn't make sense to do a new appraisal, and that she felt that the property had no value. Now, why I say that is because in order to make that property come up to current building rules, it would cost a couple of $1 million. We've had a report that says that. So based upon the cost to rebuild that building, to use it for any kind of office space, it would be extremely expensive. So town council is going to have to look at that. We will be bringing the invitation to bid forward to town council probably at that next general government meeting. And we can discuss that issue when we're in subcommittee.
Okay, great. I know we've talked about it. You've talked with myself and with Councilor Steves, and we talked about the fact that there were $70,000 worth of new windows put into that building, and the differences on that appraisal, we can debate that at subcommittee, but certainly to get it up to commercial standards, to get it up to municipal building standards, it was an exorbitant amount of money. But hopefully, there's some potential to at least rid ourselves of the liability for that
Well,
building.
that's
So-
exactly the question is the town has a choice. It could spend millions of dollars to fix that building, or it could sell it to somebody else who may be able to rebuild that building at a lower cost than what the town could do. So that's one of the things we're going to be discussing in subcommittee. You're correct, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. We look forward to that. And I think the only other thing I have then is, I almost forgot, Bay Path sent me a copy of the report of their basic financial statement for the year ending June 30th, 2017, and also a copy of the independent auditor's report pursuant to the government auditing standards, again ending June 13th, 2017. They'll be here in the town manager's office if anybody would like to review these. It is something that is done every year, obviously, has to be done. So we thank them for getting that out to us. And that's all I have tonight. And we're moving on to town manager's announcements.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I want to thank you and the other councilors who did attend the MMA meeting. It was a great meeting, an opportunity for us to network, myself with other town managers and council members with other council members, to learn about what's happening in other towns, as well as the various vendors that are available that provide services to our municipality. So I thought it was a great event, and it was nice to see so many council members there. Just an update, the Town Manager's Substance Abuse Council has met recently. We have got together a draft plan as it relates to what we're going to be doing in terms of education on the side of trying to educate people about substance abuse issues. I was very happy Councilor Clements and Councilor Nash were both there, added their input to the plan. We're going to be meeting again next Thursday, hopefully to be closer to putting together a final plan that I can bring to the entire town council. So I think it's going well. I've sent the plan to one of the state officials involved with the issue of substance abuse, and I'm looking for his input on that plan as well. Obviously, we have great support among town council members who want to do everything they can to fight against the addiction problem that is not only sweeping through Massachusetts, but our entire country. So it's nice to see this council on the forefront on that issue. Obviously, the only other major issue I wanted to talk about tonight is that we are in the process of developing the budget. So all the department heads are inputting their budget into the system. We'll be meeting starting next week with individual departments to go through their budgets and to be prepared sometime in March to present the budget to the full town council where they can break it down, take a hard look at it, and make any changes that they would like as well. So thank you, and I apologize again for speaking with, I guess, a squeak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. I also want to make a note, I forgot I shouldn't have forgotten, I apologize. We have hired, or the school, the Department of Education has hired a new receiver, Mr. Vilar, and he will be starting on February 12th. If you haven't heard that, I'm sure it's been all over the news pretty much, but just making note. And they will be putting together a forum for all the board members, the counselors, and the school committee members to meet with him after he starts. So as soon as there's two different meetings. So as soon as they put together that one from Maureen Gullickson, then and we get that word, then we will put that out to everybody to attend. So. Okay. And now we have agenda item number 7, Citizens Forum. If you would like to speak to anything that is not on the agenda, please come up, give us your name and address, and you will have 5 minutes.
Hi, Maureen Doyle, 771 Lebanon Hill. I picked up the 2018 trash and recycling calendar and noticed that there's an attached piece of paper saying what not to include. And it's in English, and on the back is in Spanish. And I wanted to point this out in light of recent news that China will not accept 24 varieties of solid waste from the United States. A lot of our recyclable material goes to China, India, and Latin America, where they are processed into consumer goods and packaging to be resold to the U.S., among other places. But if our recycling is contaminated, meaning dirty or soiled somehow, they will not take it. So what really is the point of recycling? I want recycling to work here and abroad. So let's do our part in Southbridge to make sure our recyclables are recyclable. So do not include the following things in your recycling toter: plastic bags, coated paper items, disposable items, dirty stuff. Taking a few seconds or minutes to rinse out cans and milk jugs ensures that they are not dirty, and it also prevents animals from being attracted to your bin. Register tape from cash registers, toys, shoes, and plastic hangers, food waste that can be composted, plastic wrappers, hazardous materials, rubber or scrap metal, medical waste, ceramics, pots, pans, or baking glass, electronics, light bulbs, batteries. If you don't want to deal with those things, don't buy them. There are many choices of products. The 3 R's of recycling include reduce. So don't buy stuff that is just going to end up as trash. Another R is reuse. I've seen people at town council meetings go up to that cooler 3 or 4 times, and each time they get a new plastic cup. If you're going to use that thing, just get 1 cup and fill it several times. Or better yet, use a refillable cup, those plastic ones. In that list of what not to put in recycling is shoes and toys. If they're in good shape, they could be donated to a local charity or community group. There was a slogan from the Depression that fits those R's. Use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. And I think that applies here. The last R is recycle. So paper, tin, metal, dry, boxboard, and corrugated cardboard, number 1 to 7 plastic, and glass bottles and jars can be put in your bin. So let's be part of the solution instead of part of the problem, and then we can all pat ourselves on the back for recycling well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to talk to something that is not on the agenda this evening?
Kathy Lafriori, 51 Mark Avenue. I was wondering if there could be a change in the winter parking situation. A relative told me about their daughter who lives in Framingham, and they have 1 year parking on one side of the street. It seems to work for them. It's very hard if someone is away for the day and they can't be back at 7 at night to move their car. You know, that's kind of hard. And if they move it before 7 and they're not going to be back till after 7, they'll get a ticket one way or the other. So I don't know if that's anything that can be discussed. We wouldn't get as much money in parking tickets for the town, that's for sure. But I just didn't know if that was something that could be discussed at all. Just an idea.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Ms. Lynn. We can have that come up as a DPW meeting. I know it's been discussed in the past. I'm not exactly sure the full reason for either not or for or against, but certainly it's always something to reconsider. I think it's a great suggestion. Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to something that's not on the agenda? I'm not seeing any movement. Anybody else? Okay, then we're going to move on to the next agenda item. Okay, agenda item number 8, a vote to confirm the appointment of Ryan Sweeney as a full-time police officer upon successful completion of all medical, physical testing as required by Human Resources and Civil Service.
Second.
Chief, would you like to speak on this?
Certainly. Good evening, Madam Chair, Mr. Town Manager, members of the council. Thanks for having us here tonight. Just a little bit of background on this, if I could, Madam Chair, before we go over the name.
Please.
This comes from, in case there's any questions from the council, a vote that you had taken on November 20th of 2017 to appropriate $46,000 into my salary account to essentially replace 2 police officers. One's retiring in July, one's retiring in October, and I wanted to have those 2 officers replaced prior to them retiring. You've allowed that, you've put it into my salary account, so this is no additional funding at all in my budget. The budget stands where it is, and I won't be coming back to ask for any more money. As far as the candidate who's here behind me tonight, Mr. Sweeney, just quickly, both candidates were at the top of the civil service list. They were war veterans that are automatically placed ahead of them regardless of score, just based on their veteran service status. These candidates, again, were at the very top of the list. I can't get down to them. I can't get around people. Civil service sends me a list from Boston, and I have to take the most qualified candidates from that list. So Mr. Sweeney is an Army National Guard veteran. He's been about 3 years. He's getting out this year. He's been an auxiliary with us for just about 4 years. During that time, he has shown leadership to the point where we now have him training new auxiliary officers that come on. He's been a Charlton police officer, Charlton police auxiliary, for about a year. He's been a full-time dispatcher with us for 2 years. He's worked hospital security at Harrington for just about 3 years. He worked armed security. He was at Quinn Sigford Associates. He's currently working on that, so that's still in progress. During our background phase of the portion of the investigation, he's got impeccable character, impeccable background, zero driving history. He just purchased a home for what it's worth in this community. He's a stakeholder now in our community, and I highly recommend him for this position.
Anyone have anything that they would like to? No comments? Great. Mr. Town Manager?
If I could, I've had an opportunity, I'm only going to speak once, but I've had an opportunity to meet with both of these fine gentlemen. I think they're going to be a tremendous asset to our department. It's great to see that military experience and that background. So I want to just commend them and thank the families for being here to support these two gentlemen. We're going to be proud to have them on our team.
I just want to thank the chief for being proactive in the search and in making sure that we are not left wanting for more police officers and more security in our community. So thank you for taking a very proactive approach to this. All right, if there are no other questions, all those in favor? All right, unanimous. Motion carries. Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Sweeney. We'll move on to agenda item number 9, vote to confirm the appointment of Jalen Doughton as a full-time police officer upon successful completion of all medical and physical testing as required by Human Resources and Civil Service.
If I could again, through you, Madam Chair, Mr. Doughton, who's standing right behind me, beside me, he's worked for our Cops and Kids program for about 6 years now as a mentor and a coach. Everybody here is familiar with the Cops and Kids program. That basically means he has mentored hundreds of children in this community over the last 6 years. He's coached high school basketball, AAU basketball. He's refereed, dealing with unruly parents, unruly kids. My children are in youth sports now, and I would not want to be in that position that he's been in for several years. He started about 3.5 years ago at a retail company, rose up to a shift manager, showing his dedication to that company. I'll say he lacks experience on the law enforcement side, but he has an impeccable background, impeccable driver history. He's born and raised in this community, which is important. His entire family is in this community. He's got family members that work for me now at my police department. It's an impeccable history and a family history, and I'm willing as the chief to say I'm confident that with the proper training, this gentleman can be an outstanding asset to this community for many years to come. With that, I highly recommend Mr. Dodd.
I need a...
So moved. Second.
Thank you. You're a little overzealous there, Chief. We didn't get a first and a second, but I appreciate that exuberance. Okay, any questions or comments here? All right. I want to thank you again for bringing us some homegrown men to our ranks. So I think it's wonderful to know that they have both come up from here, auxiliary members, homeowners, and Cops and Kids is really dear to my heart.
Absolutely.
So it's wonderful that you've given your time for that. So thank you, Chief, for finding us some great candidates. All right, if there are no other comments, all those in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Welcome to the family. Congratulations. Congratulations. Welcome.
Mrs. Sweeney, thank you. Congratulations.
Okay, very good. We'll take a moment here. The families will, not sure who's staying, pictures. Our next agenda item is going to be the presentation by the Zoning Review, Improving Southbridge Regulations, the Zoning Review Committee, Improving Southbridge Regulations by Judy Barrett, who's principal, Barrett Planning Group, LLC, and Daphne Politis, who's the AICP and Community Circle, and Rosemary Scrivens, our Planning and Development Director. Yes, who would you like to preface?
Yes, we're underway with our zoning bylaw update, and very happy to introduce the two consultants who are working on this. Judy Barrett from Barrett Planning LLC, extremely experienced in zoning, affordable housing, you name it. She's probably, if not the number one expert in the state on zoning, probably the top 3. So we're very fortunate to have her here working on our project with us, and Daphne Politis, who was the lead on our master plan. Yes, you were the lead on the master plan. That was before my time. And then part of the team for the economic development plan. And then again on this team with Judy doing, she's an absolute expert on engaging the community. So welcome tonight to give us a presentation on the audit of our current zoning bylaw.
I just want to say we've included it here so that people at home could know exactly what's going on. This affects a lot of businesses, residential, commercial. It pretty much affects all of us. Any citizen here in Southbridge, it affects. So having said that, we were very adamant that the presentations and reports come back to the community, and while this may make for a longer meeting, it certainly is informative, and it's something that we all need to be aware that's going on, because it will come to pass. The changes will be in effect probably by the fall time. So,
a longer meeting, but a fascinating topic.
Yes, absolutely.
Happy to be here. I'm Judy Barrett. I just want to point out that we actually have a third person on our team who's not with us this evening, but it's Attorney Robert Ritchie, who is the former Director of the Municipal Law Unit at the Attorney General's Office, former Amherst Town Council. I mean, his reputation precedes himself. I don't need to explain, but we're very fortunate to have Bob on this team, and he has participated, as Daphne has, in the review. I want to just give you a summary of kind of where we are. We were here for a couple of hours to meet with the zoning committee before your meeting tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, but I think I'll just dive into this for now. So what we've done so far is called a zoning diagnostic. A zoning diagnostic, the easiest way to explain this is it's kind of a deep dive into your zoning bylaw. So there are certain things that we look at when we do one of these projects. And this is important to do before we start trying to rewrite a zoning bylaw. We need to kind of understand what the issues are. So we make an attempt to look at your zoning, tell you what we think the issues are, so you can then push back at us and say, boy, you know, you got all that right, or gee, you should look at these other things too. But we kind of mutually agree through discussion about what the scope of the revision should be. So we look at, first of all, the structure and the format of the zoning, because that's probably the most basic thing, is how is the document organized. We look at that first. We look at how easy is it to find your way around in this document, which is not only a function of structure, but also just the code, the numbering system, the where information is. Can someone reasonably find the information that one typically looks for in a zoning bylaw, which is, what can I do with my property? How much can I do? And what do I need to do to get a yes? I mean, that's sort of the basic meat of zoning: use, dimensional requirements, and procedures. So we try to sort of see how easy it is to find that information. How clear is the zoning bylaw? When two people read a page, do they arrive at the same interpretation? Does the language mean the same thing to people? Or are there provisions or sections of the bylaw that are kind of muddy and ambiguous? And sometimes that just happens because different people have tried to edit it and make it better over time, but people don't always use words quite the same way. So some of these things just happen in every community zoning bylaw. And I guess I just want to point out, there's nothing in our review that's sort of catastrophic. Many of the things that we see in your zoning, we've seen in other communities as well. I think it's just the nature of what happens as these documents get amended over time. So we also look at kind of, well, what's here that's kind of obsolete, that's old, or what's missing that from zoning based on what we typically see in other communities. Now, you may not want to do what everybody else is doing, but if there's something out there that's a trend, we'll point it out to you and say, is this something you want to consider or not? We also look at, are there elements of your zoning that perhaps need to be updated to conform either to the State Zoning Act, which is Chapter 40A, or judicial decisions. Court decisions also shape what we understand about what can be done with land use law. And then finally, we also look at the zoning bylaw from the standpoint of policy. You've recently done a master plan here, you have an urban renewal plan, the economic development plan. You've done some recent planning here, which is great. So as part of the zoning review, we say, well, how close is your zoning bylaw today to what these plans have recommended? So that's the sort of scope of the review. I would say this bylaw has a number of positives. I think your community should be commended. First of all, I have to tell you it's refreshing to come into a community and find a bylaw that's relatively simple. Now, as I said to the zoning committee earlier, that also can be a little bit of a liability. But I've worked in a lot of towns where the zoning is just very complicated. There's a whole lot of stuff dumped into it. And all of a sudden, it becomes awfully hard to understand. So there's a simplicity to the bylaw here that I think actually can be advantageous to us and to you, even though there's a lot of ways in which it needs to be clarified and updated. You've recently adopted some important things, such as the solar bylaw. You've done some recent cleanup here. I mean, I looked at the previous version and I looked at the version from the 2016 amendments. And so there's been some work here, which is really important, and it gives us a good foundation on which to build. I think the bylaw is kind of ready for some additional technical improvements, changes to make it a little easier to follow and understand. And then policy changes if you want to make them. And I think our job is to say, here are some policy concepts you might want to consider. What's your appetite for this? The appetite's great, we go forward. If your appetite's not there, we let it go. So in looking at the structure and the format of the bylaw, I think one of the things we found is that you need a better numbering system. The numbering system tends to fall apart in your zoning bylaw, and it creates a lot of sort of needless confusion. Some work has been done on that. We think that even more could help it. There's some reorganization that we think needs to be considered. You have administrative and enforcement provisions kind of scattered in different parts of the bylaw. Getting all of those things together in one section would make the thing very standard. Someone coming into your community who's worked in other towns and worked with other zoning bylaws would say, oh, I get it now. Administration and enforcement, I know what's there. The building inspector, building permits, special permits, Board of Appeals, site plan review, all those things that are the procedures that are in one place. You also have some situations in your zoning where you have a term that's defined, and then regulations that affect that term are also in the definition. And you really don't want to do that. And the one that comes to mind, because it's just an easy one to remember, is home-based businesses. You have a definition, but then in the definition section, you also have all the regulations that affect that use. That actually belongs in a different section. The problem with leaving it there is that people who are accustomed to working with zoning will go to use regulations to find requirements for use. They'll go to dimensional regulations to find how much. If something's tucked away in a definition, they may miss it. So the ordering of this information is terribly important. And then kind of grouping like sections all in one place so they're easier to find. And a good example of that is you have a watershed overlay district, you have a floodplain district. Putting all your kind of overlays together in one place makes it easier for people to find them. And again, I think with a better numbering system, it will be easier to reorganize the content in a way that's kind of intuitive for folks to use. Access and ease of use is again, I think I mentioned earlier, how easy is it for someone to find their way around? And so we suggested some things like incorporating some color in the document actually can be very advantageous. And an example I'll give you is your zoning map has color for different districts. If your table of uses follows the same color scheme, then someone looking at the map can say, oh, that color is that geography, and here's what you can do in that space. And so all of a sudden now the map, the geography of the map, and the use regulations start to come together. It's just a very kind of simple and interesting way to make the document easier to follow. An alphabetized index at the end is always very helpful. So if people don't quite know where to find something, they can go to the index and look it up alphabetically and say, okay, now I know where to find site plan review. Permitting flowcharts are also very helpful. Typically, they're not part of the zoning bylaw. They might be added as sort of a non-zoning exhibit in the zoning book. But it's sort of a way for people to say, I want to do site plan review. What does this involve? I need a special permit. What does this involve? So permitting flowcharts are helpful to applicants and also very helpful to boards. If the document is going to be available online, as it currently is now in PDF format, hyperlinking it is also very helpful. That way, if people are looking at a definition, I'll use home-based businesses again as an example. I'm looking at the definition. I want to find the regulations. I click on it. It takes me to the place in the bylaw where all the regulations are for home-based businesses. That's making a document navigable in our time, which is a digital time. Clarity and consistency. This really has to do with our words well chosen. Is the syntax of the writing clear? Are there mechanical problems? So, you know, most of our review is really in this realm. It's things that could just be clearer if the language was tweaked. It just needs careful editing. I don't know how else to describe it. And again, you're not alone. I think that in any community I've worked in where there have been multiple amendments over time, you start to get different voices in the document. So just kind of taking the time to neutralize the differences of those voices can make a huge difference in how easy it is to understand an ordinance. Your bylaw also, like many of them, tends to kind of use very broad words like appropriate and reasonable. Those are really conclusions, but they need to be based on findings. And so we need to make sure that the bylaw is clear about the findings that the planning board or the Board of Appeals needs to make when they're doing a special permit or a site plan review, so someone can understand how they ultimately determined this is appropriate or this is reasonable. So that's sort of those missing pieces that I think will be helpful to you in the new bylaw. We look at state laws. State laws change, as you know, all the time. And so it's easy for a zoning bylaw to fall out of sync with state law. So there were just a couple of things we noticed that we're going to want to pay some extra attention to. And one is, how do you regulate and handle group homes for adults with disabilities? There are Fair Housing Act issues. We just want to make sure that that's handled properly. You have a number of so-called exempt uses in your zoning. And by that I mean uses that the state says are exempt from, say, a special permit requirement. Your zoning has a number of those so-called exempt uses listed as requiring site plan review. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. The only thing that I think we would say is the scope of site plan review for an exempt use is kind of different from the scope of site plan review from some other use. And it would be good for the site plan review bylaw to make that clear. What is the scope of the planning board's review when it's a use that's exempt, like a church or a private school? And the same is sort of true with agricultural uses. And there's another place in the table of uses where you attempt to require a special permit for federal or state or county uses, and you really can't do that. The supremacy clause sort of stops you from that. And then we had some questions, which I think we've resolved from the meeting this afternoon, about the legal status of the central core group, which raises a number of issues for us about how we're going to make it clear how that operates in your zoning. But we had questions about that, and part of the questions were just making sure the town understands that you can't have a zoning district in which everything requires a special permit. The Massachusetts Appeals Court said you cannot do that in 1984, and you can't do that. But I think we kind of know how to fix that problem now. So administration, I don't see any major issues. The pieces are there, they're just kind of disorganized. We want to sort of make it clear to people who may be applying for a special permit how that application process works, when a special permit takes effect. If the board is going to decide to waive a site plan requirement, what are the basis for doing that, how it gets recorded in a decision. I'm sure all of this stuff sounds like, oh my God, I can't believe how procedural this is. But these things are really important, and they can protect you from being sued, or certainly help you defend yourselves if there is a suit. And then also looking at the performance standards and trying to tease out what performance standards can you actually administer in your community and which ones are sort of in the bylaw, but nobody even has the information to enforce them. Sometimes we find in zoning bylaws very tough to track down sound or noise or light standards that really, it sounds great in the zoning bylaw, but nobody even has the information to track it. So do you really want to keep it in your zoning? Those kinds of things we've raised a question about. Incomplete or outdated content, I mean, one of the things we noticed, this is a minor thing, but we need to fix it. Right now, your zoning bylaw says a special permit lapses in 24 months. Well, that was true until a few years ago. Now it's 3 years. You have a cluster and plan development provision, which, as we understand, it hasn't really been used. Excuse me. There are other ways to think about encouraging open space and residential development that might be worth looking at, where actually you don't require a special permit, it's by right, but you've got clear standards for how it's done. So that's an example of something that you might want to consider. If you want to stay with a special permit, open space development, we can help you improve what you have. So we'll give you options. Missing topics. Again, these are things that we just sort of see in other towns. You don't have to do these, but we're bringing them up. Inclusionary zoning, which is a requirement that new residential development includes some affordable units. You often see that in Massachusetts zoning. We didn't see it here. If you want it, it's something we can provide. If you don't want it, that's fine. The bylaw doesn't recognize particular types of senior residential development that most communities do today because they want to encourage it. Things like assisted living residences or over 55 housing, congregate housing. I understand you may actually have some of that in your community. We want to make sure the zoning bylaw recognizes it and says you can do it. I know we didn't see marijuana regulations in the zoning, so we brought it up. I understand you're dealing with that, so I won't even go there. And then doggy daycare. Don't laugh, but this comes up in every town I work in, is how do people regulate the desire to have daycare facilities for dogs. So these were just things we sort of didn't see and thought we would ask. Are these things that you want us to consider adding to your zoning? There are also these policy questions, which I'm going to defer to Daphne because she worked on the master plan, and she really kind of helped to sculpt this section of the report. So why don't you maybe come up and talk a little bit about this? Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Hello again. So, as Judy said, the town undertook 3 major planning efforts: the urban renewal plan, the master plan, and the economic development plan. And all 3 of those had a very robust public participation process, so a lot of people were involved. In addition to that, as part of this zoning audit, we did a number of stakeholder interviews. And from that, we gleaned that there's a lot of consensus about what people feel would improve Southbridge, what people feel is missing from Southbridge, what people feel they would like Southbridge to be like. So some of those things cannot be dealt with by zoning, or not by zoning alone, but a large number of them can. And so what we've tried to do is identify of those sort of goals and elements of a vision for a desirable future. What can zoning do? What can zoning do to support that vision? Where is it an obstacle to achieving it? And where can it actually foster or incentivize it from happening or to happen? So I would say the number one area where people really came together around what they would like is the downtown. People love the downtown, and they love to hate the downtown. But people really focus on that as the community's living room that has a lot of, missing furniture. So there are not a lot of people using it. So we have to start by thinking about, well, what is the downtown? Where are its boundaries? There wasn't even agreement about that. Everybody seems to know where the center of it is, but where are the boundaries? Then what's allowed there by right? What should be there by right that doesn't require a special permit? Because that's what people want to see in the downtown. Sort of related to that, but expanded out further, is this idea that people really would like to retain existing businesses and recruit new ones. And that's not only in the downtown, but that economic development occur in the downtown as well as in the industrial uses in the industrial park. And even think about maybe having some incubator spaces that would help to provide a space for seeding new development. Another area where people thought we needed a new vision and that zoning could help to support that is in the Globe Village area. So think about how that could be in the future and how should it be rezoned to support that new way of development. Reclaiming the river so that it provides recreation, housing, educational and economic development opportunities, and really making that more of a feature. In the master plan, we've documented a lot of poor health indicators. There are large portions of the population who suffer from a wide variety of health issues that include childhood asthma, obesity, hypertension, a lot of substance abuse. And some of these can actually be supported or improved by providing facilities such as walkability, biking, recreational facilities that will help to support a healthier lifestyle, and fitness is a way of addressing some of these health issues. In addition to that, providing opportunities for healthier eating, for healthier foods. So that's tied into what Judy was pointing out as the need to look at the agricultural uses and how to support related businesses to the agricultural use. So maybe some of those farm stands can come closer into the center of town. Maybe farmers markets can be more broadly experienced. So we heard some about your new ways of addressing the school system, but you know very well that the reputation of the school system has not yet improved. So there's been difficulty attracting families with young children. We all believe and hope that that will change, and soon, but it will take time. And even once the school system has improved, it will take more time for the reputation to improve, because the word needs to get out. In the meantime, there's an increasing elderly population that has needs for affordable, smaller units of housing that maybe are in walkable areas. And so what Judy was talking about is making it more explicit and even encouraging the creation of some of that. And there's a wide range of abilities, so maybe assisted living units, memory units, so providing full set of services for this aging population. Just give a couple more highlights. So not just the school system, but the reputation of the town overall has had its challenges. So how can zoning help with that? It can help by starting to work on a new image, by providing opportunities and supporting new uses that are very contemporary, that are kind of edgy, which is in line with what Southbridge is, but in this sort of new and exciting way. So encouraging work-live spaces for artists and some of the mill buildings. Thinking about what is new in the economy, what is new, up and coming, that surrounding communities are not they're not in the position to provide, because you have all of the other things that they don't. So it's actually an opportunity to start working on that using zoning. Also, the gateways. The gateways are the first impression. So working on improving those gateways into town, the physical quality of those gateways, by zoning them in a way that supports redevelopment so that it's a positive aesthetic upon entering the town, that can start to work on the town's reputation. And then Harrington Hospital, a big asset. We heard earlier in the working group meeting that you've already started to work on be more of a kind of health medical campus, so that it's not just incremental changes, so it really has the opportunity to, by right, have some of these, some of the uses that are related to the hospital, so that it is, really taking, it has a big role in the community, but it's allowing it to have an even bigger positive impact. So those are just some of the examples of how the zoning can support and even encourage some of the policy changes.
So, Madam Chair, if anyone on the council has questions, we'd be happy to respond, or we'll try to respond anyway.
Okay, thank you very much. It's nice, concise. Certainly, we spent a couple of hours listening between 4 and 6. Councillor Steves was there. So
thank you.
You were able to, I was wondering how you're going to do it, but you did pull it together pretty good there. So thank you for that. And yes, councillors. Councillor Manna?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. I guess thank you. I'm sorry I wasn't able to make the meeting.
That's okay.
One of my questions is, how often do you recommend reviewing the zoning bylaws? Every 5 years, every 10 years, every 3 years? I mean, because they should be reviewed, and what you discovered, I'm assuming they haven't been reviewed in a while?
Well, I think there was some updating done recently, because I saw the amendments from October 2016, and I looked at the previous version, and there's definitely been some improvement here. So credit to your community. You know, I think probably like every 10 years, you probably want to sort of step back and do just a look at it. But it's also a function, too, of how much has it been amended. You know, if you have a bylaw that you're happy with and you're not making big changes to, you may not need to do this kind of review right away. But if there's been a lot of amendment activity, you probably want to take a look, because one of the things that makes this so hard is just different voices getting into the documents. It just happens when you have different people working on it, so.
Well, like you said, state laws change.
Yes, that's the other thing, too.
And we want to make sure that we're in
Right.
sync with our state laws.
Right.
So I'm just like, I was just looking for something, because I know, like, when our charter is looked at, our bylaws need to be looked at. And so I didn't know if it should just fall in line with that, or if
I'd say every 10 years, maybe a little more frequently if you're doing a lot of amendment work.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other councilors have questions? Councilor Steves?
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks again for participating and doing the much more detailed stuff that you talked about earlier today. While you were talking tonight, I came up with a couple more questions that I didn't think of then. One thing I was curious about is, how many towns similar to ours have you compared us with during the course of this process?
Oh, my gosh.
In terms
You
of
know why I hate to answer that question? Because no matter what town I say, people will say, well, they're not really like us. I have not had that much experience working in a town with a town council. I mean, I've worked in cities with city councils, I've worked with towns with representative town meetings, but as you know, there aren't that many of you.
Right.
So I've worked in Winthrop and Watertown in terms of towns that have a town council form of government.
I was thinking actually more in terms of like the way our town is laid out as kind of it's like a mini city with the kind of economic issues that we have. I'm thinking like Webster and some of those similar communities, Webster or Spencer or whatever.
We were just talking about this but, after the meeting, that one of the things that's just so lovely about this town is that you have this form that everybody wants. You have this tight core, you have where people have worked and people have lived, and there's this compact development, and then you have a much lower density, kind of undeveloped area flanking all around that. I mean, towns die to get that. So it's actually not all that common. I mean, when I think of towns that have a tight core and a lot of open land around them, you know, but very different from you, I suppose Groton is one that comes to mind. Salisbury, ironically, has a tight core. It's just a coastal community, so it's different, but you get outside the core of Salisbury and it's another world, sort of like you are here. So, you know, I mean, I'm not trying to dodge your question, but I've worked in so many towns in Massachusetts, and every time I go into a community, I sort of try to look at, well, what is it in this town that's like some other place I worked? And you'll come up with 3 or 4 things that make it look just like some other place you've worked. And then the longer you're there, you realize, oh my God, it's a totally different community. So it's a little hard to answer your question. But
Yeah, we're a unique creature, that's for sure.
I have worked in Webster, though, to answer your question. I worked on the community development side in Webster off and on for years, so I do know that town.
Oh, okay. And also, I was curious, I don't know if this would be more for you or for Daphne, but when you were talking about the health and other related issues, I was curious if you could spend a little more time talking about how can zoning help us address the building issues that are often linked to these things, or the pollution issues or something like that.
Do you want to take this? Just the health issues.
But how can zoning address what exactly?
How can zoning help us address the kinds of building-related issues or the pollution-related issues or those kinds of things that are often associated with the health issues that you raised?
When you say building related, do you mean the air quality inside a building, or do you mean the exterior of the buildings?
Both.
Well, the air quality inside the building would be more of a building code, right?
Yeah, I know.
And health department issue. But zoning can help with public health in that more and more is being recognized. In fact, the Center for Disease Control is providing grants to address public health issues through planning, through urban design.
Okay.
By providing walkability, by providing bikeability, by providing recreational opportunities, but also we want to think about mental health. It's not just physical health.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of isolation in seniors, but also in the community at large. In fact, I don't know if you just saw, Great Britain has now a ministry of loneliness.
I saw that.
And
Actually, I saw that
50% of
yesterday,
the
yeah.
people in the United States live alone. Now, living alone doesn't make you necessarily lonely, but it does increase the chances. So providing opportunities for gathering. So if you, in the zoning, provide for pedestrian space that's not just a sidewalk, but a little bit larger, that's more of a gathering space, a plaza space. Street furniture where you can pause. And these seem like little things, but they add up to creating opportunities for building community and for making a community more connected. Now, this community is more connected than a lot to begin with, but that doesn't mean, if you look at those health indicators, that there aren't people suffering from some of these issues of isolation. And it's also quite divided in some ways.
Yeah.
So this is an opportunity to start bringing the different divisions, to mend them together. But in terms of the physical fitness, it's really about fitness, providing opportunities for fitness.
I want to add one
Please.
thing to that, too.
Cool.
I think it's also about landscaping. And one of the things, sometimes it takes me a while with my 64-year-old brain to think about an answer to a question.
Okay.
When you ask about other communities, one of the things I have found in being in this field for a long time is that communities that are not wealthy sometimes have trouble giving themselves permission to demand quality because they are so concerned about building a tax base, fiscal sustainability, for all the reasons you can understand, that sometimes communities will just sort of take whatever comes along because they're trying to build their tax base.
Yep.
If I give you any message at all out of this process, it's give yourselves permission to have qualitative standards in your zoning. When you start to think about things like lighting, like landscaping, you're creating a place where people walk, where they drive, where they live, where their kids go. Think about zoning as a way to create a place. And what do you want to have in that place? It's not just buildings and concrete sidewalks.
Have you ever had zone situations where you can specifically have zones that call for things like co-ops and things like that, just other kinds of shared uses where, like you mentioned loneliness earlier and how many people live alone, where you can set it up so that they may have their own apartments, but they're sharing facilities of other things that they need?
Co-housing.
Yeah,
co-housing.
that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Definitely.
And there's different models of that too, but yes.
Okay.
And if that's something that is of interest, you need to tell us.
Okay.
But just to piggyback on Judy's landscaping is actually much more important than one might think on just,
Very important.
It actually does affect, breathing, and it provides shade from sun and from sunburn.
All right.
And it really does help to create the sense of place that would make it more walkable, more pausable. Because it's not just about walking by each other, right? It's about pausing and increasing opportunities for interaction.
Yeah. That's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you again for providing us with the information this evening. I know that you'll have more updates as this goes on. The message I'm taking away is consistency. We need lots of consistency in our bylaw in terms of terms and organizational clarity, ease of use, so that moving forward we can promote development and everything else good for the community. So,
Yes.
all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, you're presenting for that all boards, correct? The all boards meeting is,
That's right.
right, so the all boards meeting is
February 8th.
Thursday, right?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, moving right along. We're going to move on to agenda item number 11. Vote to confirm the appointment of Tia Duran Paradise to the Economic Development Commission for a one-year term effective immediately through June 30th, 2019.
Second.
Any discussion on this item? Mr. Town Manager? Oops. Oh,
Okay, I
sorry.
was just going to go through, that was on P&D's
sorry.
agenda, and I have that in front of me. Mr. Santangelo said that she's a longtime Southbridgean. She runs a Spot Shopper. She's 19 years in business development and marketing and would like to improve the relationship with and marketing to other towns. She'd help fill out, this is the last seat available on the Economic Development Commission, which has 7 members. And he said that he's really happy people like this with talent want to participate. Ms. Paradise said she sees her priority as educating business owners and creating a good plan to promote what the town is willing to do to help them. Rosemary mentioned that the one-year term is intended to stagger the appointment that's been vacant so long she didn't really know who Ms. Paradise is actually replacing. And Councilor Nash mentioned that he's heard extremely positive comments about her and likes her unwavering enthusiasm. And her nomination was passed unanimously.
All set?
That's it.
Great. Is there anyone else who would like to add anything or have any questions? Okay. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Motion passes. All right. You'll let her know about Rosemary, you'll let Tia know that she was approved and things that she needs to do. All right, great. Agenda item number 12, vote to accept the FY 2018 Formula Council on Aging Grant in the amount of $31,670 incurred July 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2018.
Second.
Okay. Just comment, this is a grant that we get every year for the Council on Aging. Mr. Trombley is out for personal reasons this evening and apologizes for not being able to explain any questions that you might have, but I'm sure the town manager or EHS, who had this on their agenda, could explain to us.
Through you, very
Yes,
briefly,
please.
this was the main item on our agenda from the 24th, last week. Very briefly from the minutes, Mr. Trombley explained that these are additional monies for the Council on Aging, and again, the amount is $31,670. The monies are used to facilitate programs for our seniors, provide for the upkeep of copiers and other such uses as are not available through the regular budget. Mr. Trombley stated that 164 seniors are currently being serviced and will be additionally helped by this grant. I'll go on to add that this does help fund the program coordinator, which is quite a valuable position, according to Mr. Trombley. Wasn't a long discussion. It was a very short meeting, but obviously good use of these funds coming through. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? All right. All those in favor? Unanimous motion passes. Agenda item number 13, vote to ratify the contract with Sweeney Merrigan Law, LLP, to join several towns in an opioid lawsuit.
So moved.
Second.
And this came from General Government.
Came from Gen Gov. Yeah, and I did kind of start to summarize it a little bit earlier. I just want to add a couple of more points to it. Earlier, I mentioned that that the idea is primarily go after the three big distributors, and those are McKesson, Cardinal Health, and AmerisourceBergen, whose gross revenues are $490 billion. One of the lawyers, Tucker Merrigan, mentioned that those three basically amount to 85% of the distribution in the U.S. And why there's an issue here is that back in 1970, the U.S. government, the FDA, the Congress passed the law that basically created what he called a closed system, so that these trio were allowed to dominate the marketing for a large quantity of the drugs, but they had to self-monitor, and the issue is essentially that they haven't been doing it. So, like, for example, he cited an example of a case in a place called Kerwin, West Virginia, I think it was, where 9 million pills were sold to a town of about 400 people over the course of 2 years. And those other issues that's one of the more egregious issues, but there are other issues like that out there. So the issue for us is to help to, as I mentioned earlier, to try to come up with to point out how this has impacted us over the years, how it's likely to impact us going forward, and to help get something from them to help address those issues over the long term, hopefully.
Councilor Steves, do you have the number, the billion-dollar industry situation? Did you comment on?
You mean the $490 billion that I just mentioned?
Yeah, so it was $490
Yeah.
billion. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be clear as to why they're promoting the funds, if this comes to fruition, that the funds will be used, as you said, to help the communities, to help the state, the country, who's been affected by this lack of self-monitoring and specific issues, healthcare, policing, safety, everything that goes forward, and to make them more accountable for future distribution. So, yeah.
And one thing that Mr. Merrigan mentioned also is that 80% of new heroin users started with some sort of a pill addiction, usually, obviously, opioids.
Councilor Manna?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. I feel it's important also to recognize that this was a bill back in 1970 that was passed by Congress.
That's a problem.
And it's up to us to hold them accountable as well, because it was lack of oversight on their part as well. And that's what happens when you get your your politicians in there for 20, 30, 40 years at a time. So you need to hold them accountable as well. That's all. Thanks.
Councilor Carrasco.
Yeah, just like I pointed out at the subcommittee, I just want to reiterate tonight to the citizens that are watching that I just want to publicly thank our town manager, who has really taken full charge of this opiate issue in regards to trying to do something in our community. He came on board and established the Substance Abuse Council, who has been working, and he went out and looked for this for us, so we can look for more resources to be able to prepare our police officers, our firefighters, and see if those funds do come to pass, we can better equip our community and try to tackle something that's just so devastating in so many ways.
Also, thank you. Councilor Steves again.
While you was mentioning that, made me think of that. I wanted to add one more point, is that there's a whole bunch of information available if anybody's interested in following the course of this case, and actually you can even look at the actual documents that have already been filed in court. You can go to massmola.com. That's the organization that's coordinating, that's the lawyers' organization that's coordinating all of this stuff, and they'll have all of the documents available and what comes up down the pike, and you'll be able to see it as the process goes along. So. And also, I just wanted to add to what Councilor Manna mentioned a little while ago. I agree with what you just said. I'd also like to point out that this is a perfect example of the fact that there's way too much money in the government. This wouldn't be happening if there weren't so much money in Congress. Yes.
Okay. Do you want to add? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. First of all, back about a month and a half ago, or about a month ago, there was a phone conversation among managers all throughout the state, town managers, and this law firm looking at this issue. It's an extremely important issue because, I think most people have heard a lot about drugs coming in from south of the border, but we have a bigger problem in some ways, I think, than even that. These are drugs that are available that are legal. They're legal drugs that are moving out into the marketplace in a lot of bad ways. There's clearly an overprescription from doctors of this particular drug. And truthfully, I don't even believe it's the doctor's fault. It's manufacturers and distributors who are marketing this product to the doctors. As a matter of fact, when they first started doing this, this type of narcotic opioid was described as non-addictive, if you can believe that. In fact, we're here in Southbridge and across the state watching people die as a result of these overdoses. And it's horrendous what we're seeing on the streets. In a recent newspaper article, I made the comment that in some ways this is no different than the drug dealers on our street corners, because it's just that dangerous, the amount of pills that are across our nation, and in fact here in Massachusetts. I do want to point out, I've had an opportunity to talk with our law firm about this, and the law firm involved in this particular opioid lawsuit. And I want people to understand that about 25% of the return, let's assume that the lawsuit goes forward and all the towns win the lawsuit. About 50% of this will go to the law firm, about 20% in legal fees, and about 25% of experts coming in to testify at court. So expenses as it relates to the lawsuit itself. Now that's a maximum amount, that second 25% for expenses. But the town of Southbridge would receive 50% of any funds recovered. And as Councilor Steves pointed out, that money can be used in a lot of ways. It can be used for education, it can be used for treatment, it can be used for law enforcement. The big difference between this lawsuit and the tobacco lawsuit is the money goes to the municipalities. As many of you remember, the tobacco lawsuit, the state essentially took most of the money, and really not money was funneled down to the towns. This approach, in my opinion, is much, much better because it's actually the towns who see a lot of the liabilities and damages it results to drug addiction. The increased law enforcement needs, the increased medical services needs, the treatment needs are all impacting here in the community. And this lawsuit will help us deal with those issues. And the money won't be put in some state general budget, but will actually be used here by the town to actually do programs and things that will help in this fact. I want to thank the entire town council for the support of this particular item. This lawsuit that we have before us is a standard lawsuit, so every other town that's involved in this will be voting on the same exact lawsuit contract as we have. So there's nothing unique about this. As a matter of fact, one of the largest law firms in the state, Copeland and Page, who represents many municipalities across the state, is going to be one of the legal partners in this lawsuit. And already you're seeing that law firm bring on towns all across the state to join this. So it looks like this lawsuit is going to be the lawsuit that represents municipalities across the state. So I think it's great that we're in early on this. I think it sets a great example for this community that we're going to fight this issue, and we're going to do what we can to protect the citizens of the town. This council deserves a lot of credit for bringing this issue forward so soon. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. So just to clarify, the 50%, we would receive as a community a portion of what's awarded based on how it has affected our community. There'll be some type of formula based on, and we actually, with our 7 deaths, and we rank as, unfortunately, as a very highly affected community, sad to say. And it is a nationwide effort. It's not just Massachusetts. As you mentioned, Ohio is where it's being pushed. But the overall effects are across our country, and we certainly stand to gain something should everybody see reason to it. And the gain will be your benefit, this community's benefit, certainly, to fight this problem. So, and with we were pretty adamant at that meeting, no cost to the community. Even if you decide down the road not to participate at any level, or you don't like the award granted, or there's no hidden fees, there's no cost, if we chose, as Councilor Steves mentioned, to go off and didn't like the award and we wanted to sue on our own, they would still represent and there would be no cost involved. So it just seemed the prudent thing to do for the community and to move forward. So I think it's great. Councilor Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, not to beat a dead horse, excuse the expression here, but that was a very intense and intensive meeting with the attorneys at General Government. Thank you for bringing that forward, Mr. Town Manager, Chair and Vice Chair. And what's more, I feel as though we've done our diligence in subcommittee quite extensively, and I'm very comfortable with this move. While no lawsuit is ever anything you want to be taking too lightly, we've done diligence, and I'm very comfortable with this vote. So thank you all. Look forward to it.
Great. Anyone else want to add?
I just had one quick last comment, just by the way. You probably already could have guessed this, but don't expect anything immediate, because this may take a while.
Yeah, it's definitely an ongoing project, an ongoing issue, and it's only getting worse. So, but it's something.
Yeah.
So, thanks. And I think, seeing that it's joining onto a lawsuit, I think I'd like to do this as a roll call vote, just to sort of enforce the commitment by the leadership here, the council, full leadership.
That's fine.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Councilor Nash?
Yes.
Councilor Steves?
Yes.
Councilor Eau Claire? Absent. Councilor Carrasco?
Yes.
Councilor Clements?
Yes.
Councilor DePietro?
Yes.
Councilor Manna?
Yes.
Councilor Morales?
Yes.
So that was 8 yeses and one not here. So that's, motion carries. So.
7 yes.
Oh, excuse me, 7 and 1 not here. I apologize. This motion carries. I know, we're down to, yes. Got to get my numbers right. Okay, so moving on, and I'm sure we'll be updated as that continues. Agenda item number 14, vote to ratify the contract between the town of Southbridge and Kessel Booze. Is it Booze or Bose?
I think it's Kessel Booze.
Kessel Booze, yeah, BOOS LLC, for the feasibility study and design services for the fire station facility in the amount of $50,000.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the manager has moved on here for a minute. That's okay. We have in our audience Mr. Jack Jovan, and he is the head of the committee, the building committee, the Firehouse Building Committee. So would you like to
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
thoughts?
I did
Thank you
speak
for
to
being
the town
here.
manager briefly. Due to his voice, he gladly gave me the microphone, and I'll just touch base for a few minutes. As everybody may be aware, the Fire Station Building Committee has been in existence for a number of years, many, many years, and it kind of went dormant for a period of time, and approximately about 2.5 years ago, we revitalized that building committee, sought out some new members to discuss what to do with the existing fire station. It is probably one of the last structures outside of the dog pound that will need to be something addressed in the town. We've been meeting for the last approximately 2 years to discuss different options and to see what the next step would be. The next step is a so-called feasibility study to determine what kind of structure we're going to need and what some of the locations may be. I'm grateful to the council that they saw fit at the beginning of this fiscal year. We had gone out last year to our state representative and state senator to see if we could get some state funding to assist in that feasibility study. However, the state was not forthcoming with any funds to the town of Southbridge. So the town manager in his budget this fiscal year put in approximately $50,000 to conduct that study. At this time, I really would like to thank the DPW, especially Matt Desjardins, I believe is his name, who assisted our committee in developing the request for proposal. That young man did quite a bit of work that was asked and not expected of his role, and I'd like to thank the DPW for their assistance in that final work product. We went out for, we procured it through the proper procurement. We had approximately 5 companies that responded to our request for proposal. We actually had 6. One, however, came in at 2:08 p.m. and was disqualified because the proposals were due at 2 o'clock. Of those 5, we met as a committee, reviewed the written proposals, and invited 4 companies to come in and to do the interview process with our committee. There was, the town manager was present in our committee. Out of the 4, all 4 would have been equally up to the task. However, Castle Bowes, not only in the written proposal that they put forward, but in the interview, kind of outshone and were the right fit for our community. Castle Bowes was the architect that actually developed the project when we built the police station, so they were familiar with our community, the needs of our community. They are also at the forefront of some of the design aspects in the station, and they had already looked at some of the proposed, or thought process had looked at the town with some possible sites. So the task now, after the approval tonight, will be to meet with them and have a kickoff meeting. Given the input that took place at the meeting the other night, it was pretty favorable. Well, it was very favorable that we would move forward with this. So we do have a meeting scheduled with the architect for February 7th at 7 p.m. here in the town hall as a kickoff meeting. They will be also working with the fire chief to discuss some program features. We look forward to this project. Part of the proposal for the town's benefit is that we would look at the existing site, the existing fire station, to see if that could be retrofitted, the existing station in any adjacent area around the fire station as one site, and then it would look up to 2 other sites in town for a proposed site for this project. We anticipate or the goal is to have this study completed within the next 90 days or so. They will have that proposal to us with conceptual designs. We'll then take that conceptual design, propose, we will also have public meetings for them to propose that through the town council process and any other meetings that we deem to have possible. And we will hope to have this project before the voters of the town hopefully sometime this year. We were talking about some dates. I think June is too, while it's an aggressive timeline to try to have it before the voters in June, that may not be possible because we want to do this project right and do a complete project. We had modeled the process pretty much under this, as we did. I was very involved in the school building project, so we modeled this process along those lines. And whatever project we put forward would be what is beneficial to the town, cost-effective, that will provide a floor plan for our firefighters for their safety, and the ability for us to carry out the mission of public safety. So with that, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Thank you. Councilor DePietro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure I didn't misunderstand, and we've had this conversation in subcommittee long prior to getting this far in the game. Are you still suggesting that we're going to spend any kind of dollars at all as to a feasibility of retrofitting the current station? Did I misunderstand you just now?
That is one of the possibilities. Part of the feasibility study is to look at the existing station to see what, if anything, could be used with that station and/or additions to the surrounding footprint, whether it be the park next to it and move a monument or any additional area around that. That's one possibility. I think in any study, just like we did with the school building project, one of the things that we had to do with that school building project that came very clear was the townspeople wanted to know, did you study the existing building and was there anything you could do with that existing building outside of a new structure? And we handled that, and we were able to go to the townspeople and say, we looked at it, it wasn't feasible, and we did this project. We're going to do the same thing with the fire station.
If I may, Madam Chair?
Mm-hmm.
Again, as I mentioned in subcommittee, I mean, it's a no-brainer to spend any money looking at what we have right now, which is completely inadequate for our firefighters, to the point where we've got officers working out of essentially a closet. I wouldn't put $1. I wasn't for it then, I'm not for it now. If $1 is going to be spent on our current facility, I think it's a ridiculous waste of money.
And
in all fairness.
And I respect your opinion, Council, and that's why you study these things. For somebody, an expert, to tell you,
it's
yes,
not my opinion, sir. I do this for a living.
All set, Councilor? All set?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Yeah, just let's clarify a few things. When this was discussed, I wanted to applaud you first off because one of the things that was talked about when we discussed the money was we didn't want another study that said the building was bad. Right. We've had a lot of studies that have said the building is bad. We had a building management study for all our town buildings. We have a lot of things that say that we know the building is bad. But I can understand the concept that is there potentially an additional space, to use some and add more or something. But just to be clear for the people at home, the fees that you're looking at here that added up to the money we're spending, the first portion of this is the investigation and assessment, space needs assessment and program, so looking at existing building and seeing what we do or do not have, that's an assessment. Site investigation analysis you mentioned, the conceptual design option, which is great because we've really not gotten to that point we sort of, I guess, had something once, but it was not really feasible, to use, not have a better word. The cost estimates and the opinions of probable cost, very important, because we don't seem to have a number as to what it's really going to cost to do this type of thing, and obviously the people need to know that before we even bother to bring it to them. And then finally, the final report and presentations. All that complete assessment adds up to the money for this project and the 90 days and the full presentation. And also they are, my understanding from subcommittee, this group that you picked is very good with presenting all their data to the community. They're willing to come and to really make it a community-involved process. So I think that's a plus for us.
They're very strong on the marketing. And Councilor DePietro, I agree. I mean, being a former firefighter, being a police chief, I can walk in that building and say, yeah, it's not adequate for the firefighting needs that we have currently. But there are going to be people in the town that are going to say,
show me.
Couldn't you fix that up and do something? And it's maybe very possible because there are many in the community that I've talked to that have said, perhaps you could take part of that building down and retrofit offices and build a structure next to it. So that's something we'll take a look at.
May I respond to that, Madam
Yes,
Chair?
absolutely.
Again, you can't put 8 gallons of water in a 5-gallon pill.
Absolutely.
The footprint is not there, the building is not there. So here again, to spend $1 on trying to put 8 gallons of water in a 5-gallon pill, back in subcommittee, I thought it was ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous now. And if there's any language in there that puts $1 towards the existing facility, I couldn't support it.
I believe it's an assessment in needs. So I think this plan needs to get us where we need to be beyond the usability of the feasibility of this building. So hopefully you support it. Okay, Councilor Manna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Jovan. You mentioned something about people asking you in regards to the building, the current building, and tearing half of it and rebuilding. But is that even doable? Is that building on the historical, on some
My
type of
understanding
register?
is there was a 2-bay garage that was added on by the firefighters, not the existing full structure of that fire department.
Okay,
But
so-
if you're looking at the building to the left, there's 2 bays that were built by firefighters throughout the years. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so that's the addition.
Yes.
So that would not be on the, okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments? Councilor Carrasco?
I just want to say thank you for your steadfast dedication, because I know for 3 years almost, there's been ups and downs, no funding, and we're finally going to get this going. So thank you for your dedication, not only to you, but the committee also.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a great committee that I'm working with, and I'm appreciative of all of them.
Okay. Anything else for Mr. Jovan? Mr. Town Manager?
Just one comment for the council. I think I made this comment in subcommittee, but just to state it once again for clarity. This contract is a standard architectural contract, but it has been reviewed by Steve Medaus, our expert at Merrick O'Connell on contract law. He made a series of recommendations to Castle Booze for changes. Castle Booze accepted every one of his changes without argument. So this contract has been reviewed by our law firm, and it's a very good contract.
Councilor Nash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, just a quick question for clarity. I think Mr. Jovan referred to the $50,000 amount here as having been budgeted, but am I mistaken? Wasn't this free cash from 2017?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was
Okay.
voted on by council.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
So budgeted in some way.
It's within the budget somewhere.
Yeah, right on.
We know the account it came from.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jovan.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? We have 1 opposed and 6 in favor. Motion carries. Okay, we look forward to that in 90 days. All right. Okay, vote, agenda item number 15, vote to ratify the agreement with GCG Associates for final engineering and design services for the Central Street parking lot in the amount of $29,875.
Second.
Okay, discussion, Mr. Manager?
Sure. Before you is a contract. It's basically a standard contract that's used by CDBG. Of course, like all other contracts, we change the scope of services. This is a project we've been talking about now for 2 years. It's to do the design work for the Central Street parking lot. As you recall, we're going to be doing 2 stages of this. Some of it will be done hopefully this summer, and then the rest of it will be done next summer. This has been a lot of hard work by the Development Authority for the town. Has been very involved in beginning the conceptual design that was done with state grants in the past. This is going to finish the design work so we can move on to construction.
Okay. Any questions? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? It's unanimous, 7. Agenda item number 16, vote to amend the Southbridge Code of Bylaws, introducing a new article, 7-509, marijuana, Chapter 7-509-1, statement of intent, Chapter 7-509.2, definition, Chapter 7-509.3, statement of bylaw as written. This is going to be the 3rd and final reading. 7509 marijuana. 7509.1 Statement of Intent. On November 8, 2016, the voters of the Commonwealth approved a law regulating the cultivation, processing, distribution, possession, and use of marijuana for recreational purposes. New Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 94G, under Mass General Law, Chapter 94G, Section 3A2I, allows a city or town to limit the number of marijuana establishments in the city or town, except that a city or town may only adopt an ordinance or bylaw by a vote of the voters of that city or town if the ordinance or bylaw prohibits the operation of one or more types of marijuana establishments within the city or town, whereas in our community. A, on June 13, 2017, the citizens of Southbridge voted 1,159 to 989 in the affirmative to question 2, stating that the town shall prohibit the operation of marijuana retailers, as that term is defined in Mass General Law, Chapter 94G, Section 1, within the town of Southbridge. B, on June 13, 2017, the citizens of Southbridge voted 1,150 to 990 in the affirmative to question 3, stating that the town shall prohibit the operation of marijuana cultivators, as that term is defined in Mass General Laws, Chapter 94G, Section 1, within the town of Southbridge. C, on June 13, 2017, the citizens of Southbridge voted 1,109 to 1,029 in the affirmative to question 4, stating that the town shall prohibit the operation of marijuana testing facilities, as that term is defined in Mass General Laws, Chapter 94G, Section 1, within the town of Southbridge. D, on June 13, 2017, the citizens of Southbridge voted 1,153 to 979 in the affirmative to question 5, stating that the town shall prohibit the operation of marijuana product manufacturers, as that term is defined in Mass General Laws, Chapter 94G, Section 1, within the town of Southbridge. 7-509.2, the definition. For the purpose of this section, a marijuana establishment shall mean a marijuana cultivator, independent testing laboratory, marijuana product manufacturer, marijuana retailer, or any other type of licensed marijuana-related business for the retail recreational market. 7-509.3, Statement of Bylaw. Prohibition of marijuana establishments. In accordance with the Mass General Laws, Chapter 94G, Section 3A2I, all types of marijuana establishments as defined in Mass General Laws, Chapter 94G, Section 1, and as may otherwise be defined by Massachusetts law or regulation to include, without limitation, all marijuana cultivators, marijuana testing facilities, marijuana retailers, or any other type of licensed marijuana-related businesses shall be prohibited within the town of Southbridge. This prohibition shall not be construed to affect the medical use of marijuana as expressly authorized by the provisions of Chapter 369 of the Acts of 2012 and 105 CMR 725.000, as the same may be amended from time to time, or the ability for households to grow for personal use as defined or under Mass General Law, Chapter 94G, Section 2. Now, that is the third and final reading, as the first one was done on December 18th, 17. The second was January 8th of 18, and today is the 29th. Is there anyone want to add anything to this or discuss this? Okay. So we move on to agenda item number 17. Vote to ratify the Southbridge Code of Bylaws introducing a new article, 7-509, marijuana, Chapter 7-509, 1, Statement of Intent, Chapter 7-509-2, Definition, Chapter 7-509.3, Statement of Bylaw as written above, and first read on December 18th, 2017, second on January 8th, 2018, and this third and final reading on January 29th, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Councilor Steves.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I think that really, we should be supporting what the last November vote was, because that was a much stronger turnout, a much higher yes vote. The June ballot questions confused some people, and I know I've seen similar towns. Being a reporter, I've seen the fact that other towns' votes in other communities in the area got the same response, that they were confused by the question because of the fact, if you remember, the question was written in such a way that it was to say yes to ban, which many people didn't get. I know many people did read it, And I would assume that most of the people up here did. But even then, it's one of those weird kind of reverse questions. And personally, I think that the language that we saw there, that the vote in November, I personally think that we ought to be keeping the door open to the opportunities that this can present, and we should be zoning for it rather than against it. And that one of the things actually, maybe ironically enough, it would tie into the opiate lawsuit that we were talking about earlier, because there's been some evidence that's starting to come forward from the states that is where it is legal, that indicate that where marijuana is legal, there are fewer opiate addictions. And that there's been some evidence indicating that using marijuana can actually help people get off of opiate addictions. I don't know honestly if that's true, but it's certainly worth investigating. And I think the idea of having testing facilities and the ability to take advantage of it in our community would give us a chance to see what we can do.
All set?
Yes.
Councilor Manna.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. I respectfully disagree with Councilor Steves. These questions were fully vetted in general government. There was much lengthy discussion on them. These were approved by the state to be on the ballot. It is up to the voter to read and understand the ballot questions. And if they have questions on the ballot questions, then they need to ask beforehand before they vote. So I fully support this bylaw. Bylaws have been changed in the past. The people voted. They read the questions. I'm sorry. I just you were there at those meetings as well for general government. So you understood the questions. And I do not see where any of this marijuana should be, nobody's going against the vote of the people back in November. They are still allowed by state law to smoke their pot if they so choose. Nobody's stopping them from doing that. And I don't feel you should have brought this lawsuit in with this bylaw. I thought that was inappropriate. So I fully support this bylaw. I thank you for the work you've done on this bylaw. Again, these questions were brought in general government. There was a lot of discussion on it. It's up to the voter to read and to understand the questions. And that's all I'm going to say on that. Thank you.
Councilor DePietro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, right, wrong, or otherwise, the voters have spoken. I would agree to some extent. The language, as in a lot of these referendum votes, could be better worded. I have to agree with Councilor Steves there. But again, this goes back to an argument on a whole nother issue. We can't bring things back to the table because we don't like the outcome. And the voters have spoken, in my opinion, and we have to respect that. Thank you.
Councilor Carrasco.
Yes, I'm just going to keep my comments brief, and I would echo the sentiment of Councilor DePietro. This is not something that we can pick and choose. Unfortunately, it is what it is. The people voted. People like Councilor Manna had the right. They read the questions. They voted the way they did. If they got confused, they should have asked before going into the voting booth. There was people confused for question 1 as well. So I know I made several statements for question 1 in regards to the people voted, let's respect them. People voted for questions 2, 3, 4, and 5. They voted, let's respect them. That's all I got to say.
Councilor Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. appreciate pretty much everything Councilor Steves said. I agree with him on almost every point. One thing that stands out in my mind, and it has all along, is the lack of economic benefit that we'll see as a result. That obviously is a risk, and if that's what the voters have opted for, so be it. I will be voting to support this bylaw simply because of the statistics that are laid out before us based on the vote. But I do support the rights of the people to bring this forward again, as I've heard from just a few. But as of tonight, I'll be supporting passing this bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nash. Anyone else? Councilor Morales.
I just wanted to state for the record that I will also support the passing of this bylaw.
Okay, thank you. So just a couple of things. The question of confusion confuses me sometimes when I look at the numbers and see it wasn't as though it was an overwhelming vote yes or an it wasn't as though people were so in favor of having it that they voted the wrong way overwhelmingly. These numbers were within 100 points, 200 at most. So that argument to me seems a bit of a moot point. And I want to point out, and I never really thought much about this until I've read this now so many times, in the Mass General Law itself, it used the word prohibit. Yeah. It said, by a vote of the voters of the city or town, if the ordinance or bylaw prohibits the operation. So again, I say that while, yes, recreational use, which I'm not for at all, was allowed, but it was allowed, it did have a provision, and while you voted for recreational use back in November, you also voted for the opt-out option to prohibit the operation. And so I think that the law and the results actually speak for themselves. Now, it's a bylaw. We make bylaws. Future councils can change bylaws if by some quirk of fate or another vote, not fate, I guess, people change their mind locally here, that could happen, and they don't have to take appropriate action. But this council was elected to abide by the votes of the citizens. We keep trying to do that, and so just my input on that. Thank you all for all of yours. Is there anyone else who has anything else to add? Okay, Councilor Steves.
I just have one quick comment on that. I totally agree. I totally understand the whole point of supporting the vote of the citizens, and I do. I'd like to say that I can see obviously where this is going, but I just wanted to point out that there were a significant number of people that voted that did want to go forward with this. And honestly, that's kind of what I'm seeing as I'm going to support them.
All right then, so we're going to do a roll call vote.
Councilor Steves.
No.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said no.
No. Councilor Eau Claire.
She's not here. That's okay.
Councilor Carrasco.
Yes.
Councilor Clements.
Yes.
Councilor DePietro.
Yes.
Councilor Manna.
Yes.
Councilor Morales.
Yes.
Councilor Nash.
Yes.
6-1, motion carries. The bylaw will be inserted, and we will work on the zoning next. Okay. Moving on, agenda item number 18 is Councilors' Forum. Boy, we got to the end of that pretty quick. And Councilor DePietro, I'm going to start on your side of the table tonight.
Nothing to share this evening, Madam Chair.
Okay. Councilor Manna?
I'm silent as well tonight, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Nash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not silent, but very quickly I'd like to extend my thanks to Councilor DePietro for arranging the visit with Heather and Matt and the crew over at DPW. Absolutely agree with what you said earlier on during the subcommittee report. Very worthwhile visit. Thank you very much for that. Also to the Chair and Vice Chair for arranging for the Council of the Whole to discuss council goals and objectives. I do regret that I wasn't able to be there, but I was significantly ill, as you're aware, and you did state. And what's more, I was contagious. So I take those chest ailments pretty seriously because of my asthma. I'd also like to thank those that were here to present tonight on the zoning bylaw update. I didn't say much, but I've been following along. We received a very long email attachment today that will shed a little extra light if anybody wants to read it. And otherwise, I look forward to February. We're that much closer to March and opening day, where we can not worry about too much more cold weather. And I know this is out of line. I'm not a big football fan, but I am cheering for the Patriots next weekend. Thank you.
All set?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Councilor Carrasco?
Nothing to report this evening.
Okay. Councilor Morales?
Just wish everybody a blessed week. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to make note, I wasn't here at the last meeting, and I missed this one up before I get to you. Councilor McKenzie is no longer here, and I did send him an email, and I'm glad that you all read the minutes, and I'm glad that you all were able to give him a sending. So I wish him well in his future endeavors. But Councilor Steves.
I don't have anything tonight either. However, the next council meeting will be Monday, February 12th, here in the chambers at 7.
Great. So we now have an executive session. We're going to vote to enter into executive session to conduct strategy session in preparation of contract negotiation with the non-union personnel. And we're also going to enter into, also for the consideration of lease negotiation of real property, that is the airport diner. I'm going to note that, it's not on there. And I do declare that open session may have a detrimental effect on the negotiation position of the public body. And we will return to open session to adjourn. Potentially to vote and adjourn. Potentially vote and adjourn. And we need a roll, and we need a roll call on that, please.
Councilor Leclerc?
Not
Councilor
here.
Carrasco? Councilor Clemens?
Yes.
Councilor DePietro?
Yes.
Councilor Manna?
Yes.
Councilor Morales?
Yes.
Councilor Nash?
Yes.
Councilor Steves?
Yes.
Okay, we are 7 yeses to go into executive session. And I just want to point out, we do have a substitute recording clerk this evening. We thank you very much, Maritza, for filling in last minute. Okay, we'll see you all shortly. Okay, we are back in session here in council chambers. Roll call, please.
Councilor Morales?
Present.
Councilor Nash?
Present.
Councilor Leclerc, excused. Councilor Carrasco?
Present.
Councilor Clemens?
Present.
Councilor DePietro?
Present.
Councilor Manna?
Present.
You missed me.
You missed Councilor.
Councilor
Oh,
Steve.
Councilor Steves, I'm sorry.
Okay, we are 7 still present. Thank you very much. All right, we have 2 new agenda items that have surfaced from executive session. Agenda number 21 will be vote to ratify the employment agreement between the Town of Southbridge and Police Chief Shane Woodson for a 5-year period effective January 2018 through January 2023 at an annual salary of $128,430.85.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Councilor
Yes,
Carrasco.
through you, Madam Chair, I would like to make an amendment to Section 13C, where it talks about the chief having to give us a certain amount of time if he was to break the contract. The current language says 30 days. I would like to see it 90 days.
Second.
Okay, that's Councilor Carrasco's amendment. Do we have
Second.
any discussion? All right. So let's vote on the amendment, please. Roll call on that.
1 second. Councilor Nash?
Yes.
Councilor Steves?
Yes.
Councilor Leclerc, excused. Councilor Carrasco?
Yes.
Councilor Clemens?
Yes.
Councilor DePietro?
Yes.
Councilor Manna?
Yes.
Councilor Morales?
Yes.
Okay, so now we still have the main motion on the table to vote with the exception of the 90 days increase from 30. Any discussion on this? Do you want to explain anything at all in terms of our chief has been operating without any kind of a contract? Do you want to say anything, Mr. Chairman?
Just so the public understands, there are four positions that the state allows us to have contracts for. One is the town manager, one is the school superintendent, one is the police chief, and one is the fire chief. This contract basically secures that we will have a police chief in place for a long period of time, and the town wants that kind of security. so that we have stability in local government. This police chief has demonstrated that he can do a great job for this town. He's been a tremendous asset for the town. This contract doesn't give him any special benefit above what the union gets, so there's nothing unique in here, but it does guarantee that he gets at least what the union gets and the people that are working for him. The good thing about this is that we want to make sure that there is an incentive for police officers to go into management. This contract allows that and gives them good security. With that, I think it's an excellent contract, and I appreciate the support of the town council.
Councilor Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, thank you, Mr. Town Manager, for explaining that. What's more, this has no impact on the current budget. I know the salary is stated within the motion, and it looks substantial, but it is no different than what's already allowed and earned by the chief, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, any other discussion? Oh, Councilor Steves.
Since you mentioned the idea of what he's getting, what the union will be getting, do you know what the slated pay raise for the union is for the next year?
The union contracts are consistent in that they all have a 2% pay increase among all three of our bargaining units.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Councilor Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just add one more comment, and I think this is a great contract and a great opportunity for the community to secure the services of Chief Shane Woodson for a number of years. A 5-year contract is well-deserved in my mind, and I certainly think that's probably going to be the sentiment of this council. So, Chief, thank you for your service now and continuing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Steves.
One more question, and I agree with what Councilor Nash just said. One more quick question is, when do we renegotiate the next police union contract? When's that up?
I don't have the date in front of me, and maybe the chief knows, but the next contract up for negotiation is DPW.
Yeah.
We finished the police contract. I imagine we got almost 2 years left, or at least a year and a half on police and fire. Chief, do you know the exact date?
July 1st of 2019, so June 30th of 2019, the contract would expire.
Okay, thank you.
So we'd have to have a new one by July 1st.
Thanks.
Okay. Anything else? I think the winners here will be the citizens of our community who know that they have a good, solid chief in place. So, all right, roll call on this, please.
Councilor Steves?
Yes.
Councilor Carrasco?
Yes.
Councilor Clements?
Yes.
Councilor DePietro?
Yes.
Councilor Manna?
Yes.
Councilor Morales?
Yes.
Councilor Nash?
Yes.
7 yeses, motion passes. All
Move to
set.
adjourn.
Thank you. No, we have.
No.
It's okay. We do.
Oh, you're right,
He's
sorry.
a little ambitious here.
Retract that.
Yeah, okay. Wasn't seconded. Okay, another item that we did discuss, and it will now be up here for the community to know. Vote to ratify the amendment number 2 for the Red Baron Diner, Southbridge Municipal Airport, to reduce the rent by $250 for the months of December 2017, January 2018, and February 2018.
So moved.
So moved, second.
Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you. I think everyone here who's ever been to the diner at the airport understands that building hadn't been open for a number of years, and I'm not sure that it's ever been open in the wintertime. The building is not insulated in the way it should be. The electricity costs and propane costs have skyrocketed, making it almost impossible to run a business during the wintertime. This reduces the rent a little bit so that we could keep that diner open during the wintertime. I think that was something important to the town council, is to have consistency throughout the year so that citizens who are using that airport could use that diner. We are going to look at in the summertime to see if we can make it more energy efficient. There is a new heating system and new windows, but the building itself is a metal frame and doesn't have much insulation. So we will reevaluate this during the summer to see if we can do anything to make it more energy efficient, but if not, we may be looking at this issue next year as well. I just want, some people have gone into the diner, it's been cold and they don't want to stay there because of it, so we need to address that. I think next year we'll learn from this year and hopefully be able to make some changes.
Any other comments or discussion? All right. Seeing none,
Madam Chair.
Oops, sorry.
I just want to reiterate also that the Airport Commission will be looking at this.
Yes, right, it's on my mind. This will go now to the Airport Commission because ultimately they do have the jurisdiction up at the airport. So this is more in support of this, and we'll see what they come out of their next meeting on. So, all right, we'll do roll call on this as well since it is executive session.
Councilor Carrasco?
Yes.
Councilor Clements?
Yes.
Councilor DePietro?
Yes?
Councilor Manna?
Yes.
Councilor Morales?
Yes.
Councilor Nash?
Yes.
Councilor Steves?
Yes.
So
Motion
yes.
to adjourn.
Motion
So
passes.
moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Good night, all.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.